enter the Barnsdale Patent Carricot cold frame. Now all this is a strong cardboard box painted with gloss paint to make it waterproof and a little bit of rigid plastic. And I call it the Carricot cold frame. It consists simply of a strong cardboard box painted gloss white inside and out and covered with a sheet of rigid plastic.
He thought economy in the garden was important. He didn't want people to go out and spend a big fortune on lots of expensive, gimmicky things. He thought that if they spent money, they should spend it on plants. But he wanted to make gardening accessible for everybody. He didn't want people to have money in order to garden. He wanted them to know that gardening can be something everybody can do, even if you've got no money.
To explain how, I have built what I call an artisan's cottage garden here at Barnsdale. Artisans because I've made it just like the poorer cottage gardeners would have done, very cheaply, and I've done it all myself. And believe me, I am no expert craftsman. All the techniques are so easy that anybody could do it. And the plants, like the old cottage garden plants, are all cheap to buy and easy to propagate and to grow. Now, during the course of the series, I'll be explaining how the garden was built, and we'll be jumping backwards and forwards in time to show how it developed. The garden is designed very simply, in a straightforward, practical way, just like the old cottage gardeners would have done it. And even if you don't have a grain of knowledge of garden design, this is another thing that you can do too, because quite honestly, the garden more or less designs itself. Next week, we start building. And throughout the series, we're going to show you how to turn this into this, and this into this.
It was Geoff who got me into television gardening about 10 years ago now. And although he wasn't that much older than me, I very soon came to think of him as my horticultural dad. He had such a wealth of knowledge and experience, and he was always incredibly generous with advice and help and encouragement. But of course, like all kids, I had to rebel, didn't I? And our bone of contention was colour. I'd come up with this deeply tasteful pastel planting scheme, and Geoff would roll his eyes and bung in a bit of hot orange and some screaming magenta and say, "That's what you want, a nice splash of colour," and then roar with laughter. He had a great sense of humour, and there was always a lot of laughter when you worked with Geoff.
Now, this next sequence is the sort of thing that viewers aren't meant to see. When you're doing an interview with only one camera, the practice is to record the interviewee's answers, and then afterwards to turn the camera around and record your questions and noddies, little nods and grimaces that can be dropped into the interview. But it doesn't help if somebody's making you laugh.
I'm sorry. It's you. It's you. Thanks, Geoff. I'm awfully sorry. It's her fault. Look, I mean, what can you do? Noddies to that. Honestly. Go away, go away. I do noddies to no one. I think we forget the noddies.
Geoff always liked his filming to be as simple and straightforward as possible, but when he could see the point in doing something visually spectacular for powerful impact, then he was always prepared to have a go.
Most insect pests find their host plants by sight or by smell. So the more plants you grow, the easier they are to find. If, for example, you grow 25 acres of cabbages, what you're doing effectively is to put up a huge sign to every passing cabbage white butterfly that says, "Eat at Joe's." But in order to grow food economically, the farmer has to grow his crop in vast amounts and just risk the attentions of the hungry cabbage white caterpillars.
I'll need about 5 pallets up here of 6 in the morning if it's possible. Yeah, if that's the cover tomorrow, and whether that one will be Friday.
In order to avoid a great plague of insects, the farmer has to resort to chemical pesticides.
What time would you want those in for?
This field is sprayed every 3 weeks with 3 different chemicals, so that just about kills every insect. Now, in my opinion, gardeners make a mistake by copying the farmer too much. They must spray, but we don't have to take that risk. Bulking our plants together, like all these cabbages, is something gardeners just don't need to do. I've proved, for example, that the ornamental kitchen garden system really does work. We know that many insects are attracted to their host by sight. So what I'm doing here is, instead of planting my cauliflowers in a great big block, I'm putting them in a little patch like this. And then, once these are planted, I shall camouflage those by planting in amongst them these flowering plants, which will not only lift my spirits a bit, but it'll also completely confuse the cabbage aphid. But of course, this sort of mixed planting won't solve all the problems. We may well have denied the cabbage aphid his dinner, but the cabbage root fly will certainly find these plants. Now, what happens is that the female comes along, she sticks her egg tube into the soil right next to the stem of the cabbage and lays her eggs. Now, she has to do that so that the larvae have an immediate source of food. And unfortunately, when you see the symptoms, it's already too late. But what we can do is to protect them with one of these little tarred paper discs. And if you put that round the plant, snugly around, you can do this with cabbages, cauliflowers, Brussels sprouts, any one of the cabbage family, the female won't be able to get her egg tube down there, and she'll go off and lay her eggs on somebody else's cabbages.
Geoff was one of those people whose face would light up at the sight of a bunch of flowers, but not always for the reasons you'd think.
Now, I've just bought this bunch of carnations for my wife for purely romantic reasons. Well, I got them wholesale, and I also noticed that there are 1 or 2 good side shoots on them. And of course, these will make very good new plants. They're very easy. All you do is just pull them off like that, and then just trim below a leaf joint. I'll do that one there. Take a few of the bottom leaves off using a sharp knife like this. I also like to just compensate for the great shock this plant has had by taking a few of the top leaves off as well, and that of course is a perfect cutting. You then dip it into hormone rooting powder and then put it into a mixture of 50-50 coir and vermiculite.
Geoff had strong opinions. I can always remember being shown around the nursery side of Barnsdale by him, and he'd just taken on the organic theme very seriously, and also the peat-free theme seriously. And we were looking at this compost, and I saw that it looked different. It looked like it was coir, and I asked him, although he used coir, did he use any moss peat? And the answer came back really firmly. He said, no, I don't even allow peat on the premises. Don't even allow it here. He said, if you become peat free, you've got to stick by it.